Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into India's massive, and I mean massive, plan to completely reshape its energy future. And it all hinges on one really powerful piece of legislation, the SHANTI bill.
Okay, so to really get just how ambitious this whole plan is, you've got to start right here. Right now, nuclear power makes up just about 3% of India's total electricity. That's a surprisingly small slice of a very, very large pie.
But this is the goal. From that tiny 3% today, the government is aiming for 100 gigawatts of nuclear capacity by the year 2047. I mean, that's not just an increase, that is a monumental leap. And that right there is the big question. How on earth do they plan to pull that off?
So here's our game plan for today. We'll start with that huge ambition, then we'll look at the SHANTI bill, which is the proposed solution. After that, we'll explore its new playbook, tackle the tough unanswered questions, and wrap it all up with a final challenge, balancing ambition with accountability.
All right, let's kick things off with that ambition. And we're not just talking about a few more power plants here. We're talking about a complete transformation of how the country generates power, taking nuclear from a background player and putting it right at the center of the energy grid.
And look, this isn't just some number plucked out of thin air. The plan involves a whole wave of new reactors, including some really cutting-edge tech, like small modular reactors, or SMRs for short. And some of those are slated to come online as early as 2033. This is a serious commitment to both scale up and innovate.
Which brings us right back to the core challenge. Building nuclear plants is incredibly expensive. It's super complex. So how does a country finance and manage such a massive and rapid expansion? Well, that is precisely the problem the SHANTI bill is designed to solve.
The answer? Well, it's a pretty radical shift in policy. For the very first time, India is proposing to swing the doors of its nuclear sector wide open to private companies.
So what exactly is the SHANTI bill? Well, at its core, it's a new law that would totally change the rules of the game for who's allowed to build and run nuclear power plants in India. It basically blows up the old list of eligible players, which used to just be government-owned entities.
And you can really see that change right here. Before, the circle of who could play was tiny. Only government bodies could get a license. After SHANTI, that circle widens dramatically to include joint ventures and, the real game changer, private Indian companies. This, right here, is the key that could unlock all that needed investment.
Now, it's super important to be clear about one thing. This isn't about selling off the nuclear program to foreign companies. The focus is squarely on mobilizing India's own domestic private capital. It's about tapping into the country's internal financial power to fuel its own energy growth.
Okay, so if you're going to let private companies into a field as sensitive as nuclear energy, you absolutely need a new playbook, right? So this next section is all about how this new plan tries to balance private access with state control.
And this is where it gets really smart. It's all about a clever division of responsibility. You see, the bill keeps the really sensitive stuff, like the fuel cycles and nuclear materials, firmly under state control. No surprise there. But it allows private players to take the lead in areas like building the plants, supplying components, and handling the day-to-day operations. It's about scaling up without compromising on security.
So, what's the goal of this new playbook? Well, it's all about streamlining the whole process. The hope is that by creating one single legal framework, you can funnel investment in way more efficiently. Cut through the red tape, bring down costs, and get these plants approved and built way faster.
But of course, a plan this huge, this bold, it's going to have its critics. It's going to have some serious challenges. So let's pivot and talk about the unanswered questions, and we'll focus on two big ones: liability and governance.
So, the first big question is, what happens if something goes horribly wrong? Who foots the bill? The bill caps an operator's liability at 3,000 crore rupees, which is roughly $360 million US. Now, having a specific number helps investors calculate risk, but critics are asking, is that really enough for a major disaster? Because anything beyond that cap, well, that falls on the government. Next up, what about the companies that supply all the parts? The bill says operators can go after suppliers for damages, but only if that's specifically written into their contracts. This creates a bit of a gray area, right? It means supplier accountability could be all over the map depending on the contract. And finally, what about the referee, the regulator? The big question is, can they truly be independent? Even with all these new changes, appointments to India's nuclear regulatory body are still controlled by the central government. And for investors, that lack of total independence could raise some big questions about transparency and whether the rules will be applied fairly to everyone. And all of this brings us to the final challenge, the real heart of the matter for India's nuclear journey. It's that classic balancing act between moving incredibly fast and making sure everything is done absolutely right.
Look, there's no doubt about it. The Shanti Bill is a bold new chapter. If they get it right, it has the potential to unlock a massive wave of investment, seriously accelerate India's clean energy transition, and get the country much, much closer to that ambitious 2047 goal.
So, in the end, it all comes down to this one critical task: balancing that towering ambition with rock-solid accountability. How India walks that tightrope, that's what will decide if this huge leap forward actually lands safely.